Martial World Teyvat Chapter 39, Fan Fiction by Azazyel. After a while Jake had fallen asleep with his head leaning up against their shoulder as the stress of ascending the first level of cultivation and martial arts had caused a great deal of exhaustion to her lover. So with Shenhe's help while he slept, aided by a spiritual spell from Ganyu that kept him asleep, the two moved the shirtless young man into his and her bed just outside the cultivation abode. Really, calling it a tank of all things make it sound so uncouth. Keqing thought with amusement as she laid down across from Jake so his messy blonde head was laying on her lap allowing her to play with his hair. You are playing an interesting game there little Keqing. Yelan spoke with amusement as she rested her face on a hand as she looked at the duo. But Keqing knew it wasn't just teasing as she gave Shenhe and Ganyu a bland look and spoke. It's not as though it's unexpected. Lady Cloud Retainer is pushing for you two to marry him, or likewise just make use of him, correct? Ganyu gave a weak smile as she shifted slightly in her meditative sitting position next to the cultivation abode with her saying softly. Master has an obsession with getting grandchildren but it will pass, it always does. But Shenhe just shook her head and said bluntly. He makes me cultivate faster with greater and purified spiritual energy entering my body. I am confused on what to do with him. While Keqing's face twitched at the weird way the obviously muscle-minded dual cultivator spoke, Yelan decided to throw fuel on the fire as she chuckled and spoke. Keqing, you may be wanting your man to grow stronger quicker, but playing around with women's hearts isn't going to go well. To which she looked at the stronger nascent soul woman and with no hesitation said flatly. Says the person mooching off his spirit stone mine. It's like you are already a concubine who is helping herself to the clan's treasury. And that made Yelan's eyes widen. Not in outrage, no in wonder as she chuckled and clapped her hands together. Ah, I see what you are doing Keqing. You wish to be the head wife of the clan that will inevitably sprout up around Jake's many mining sites and the people that will flock around him. Damn that witch. Keqing thought with annoyance as she glared at Yelan's slitted blue and green eyes which were filled with amusement but a hum rang out as Ganyu spoke up quietly. In either case, I hope you don't take offense if we use your husband as a cultivation aid. As although I am a bit shy, I know my junior sister isn't so bodily shy. Ganyu finished with a flush across her pale cheeks as she brushed a hand over her blue hair and past her Qilin horns. A shake of the head was what she gave as she replied with some annoyance. It's fine. Just don't dual cultivate with my husband, I want our first time to be special as I am still getting the wedding details sorted out while this fool is busy with making this new factory. Damned man is too busy trying to revolutionize Liyue to make an honest woman out of me. Humph, the nerve of this man. Keqing thought torn with love and annoyance as she spitefully gave Jake's soft cheek a slight pinch making him frown before she gently brushed the back of her hand against his face to soothe him back into rest. For a few moments, there was silence with Yelan tilting her head to the side with Keqing's own senses tingling and she recognized with a frown the spiritual energy of the water yiksha doing something outside the factory before Yelan spoke with some boredom. Bonanas is dealing with some lesser monsters. Not an issue with her and Minoji is here. At those words, Keqing's face twisted into a frown as she remembered the Hydro Yiksha's test on Jake before she shook the memory away as she refocused at the sound of Ganyu speaking again. Anyway, Keqing, how do you feel about the chances of Jake actually making that next factory and somehow mass-producing pills and elixirs of all things? A scoff escaped Keqing before she smiled proudly as she knew she needed to stick up for her man. Even if his inventions baffled her mind half the time. Jake has managed to turn simple rocks into spirit stones, and refuel used spirit stones. At this point, I am more than willing to trust him. Then out of the blue Shenhe of all people said wisely. He can make flying machines and many other things that even Master doesn't understand. Wouldn't it be easily for everyone to just believe him? A laugh escaped Yelan at the simplicity in Shenhe's words and then the topics the girls shared lightened onto other topics while Keqing shifted slightly so she was laying down beside Jake with his head pulled flush against her chest so she could cultivate better with more skin contact as she got under some blankets. Yelan then spoke up with a leer as she looked at Keqing and as she spoke Keqing felt a dark flush enter her cheeks. I understand wanting to be your man's first wife and the importance in that. But I am curious little spark. how far have you gone with your man? Even as Ganyu covered her darkly flushed face with her hands at hearing Yelan's lewd words. She was still looking through her fingers as she looked between Keqing and Jake as though imagining some lewd and terrible thing. Keqing swallowed as she considered what to say as her blush darkened with Yelan giggling evilly at the sight before Keqing marshaled her bravery and spoke with some embarrassment. We were kissing. And he played with my breasts a good bit. But I wanted us to be married before we properly have sex or dual cultivate, you know. All three girls nodded in understanding with Shenhe tilting her head to the side and saying, It's understandable, Keqing. Though, I think I would have just gone along with it and married him when I became pregnant as we would be too busy cultivating. Well, that and I know Master would take over the wedding completely so I wouldn't be worried. Shenhe finished with a shrug. And even Ganyu with a slightly haunted look said with a wry smile. That she would. Sister, do you remember the time that Senior Fujin dash? Shenhe held up a hand and even her normally impassive and cool expression turned especially flat as she said tiredly. Senior sister. I remember all too well that incident, and even though I slayed a mighty demon before as a child, Master's force of will when she thought she needed to get a whole baby shower in order within half a day makes me feel exhausted even to this day.